Carl, the movie portrays Dan Rather and that woman who was his producer in the story, Mary Mapes, almost as if they were Woodward and Bernstein during Watergate.
Yeah. Look, this was an ugly episode in American journalism. We had a producer who had an agenda, and Mary Mapes, and she worked with her principal, Dan Rather, to produce a smear on President Bush. This movie's named Truth. It ought to be the Anatomy of a Smear. Falsified documents from a source who changed his story. That was the documents that were not verified by the CBS's own experts. I mean, it is a devastating example of journalism run amok. I would recommend before anybody go to see the movie that they Google CBS. This is on CBS's website, their independent review panel on this incident, and read 30 pages. The 30-page summary of this report is devastating about the lack of journalistic integrity by these two individuals.
Briefly explain who the main source of the story
is. The main source is a left-wing former National Guard officer who named Burkett, Bill Burkett, who gave Mary Mapes documents that he alleged came from somebody else. They couldn't get a hold of that somebody else. He later changed his story.
The significance of the documents?
The documents said that George W. Bush had gone AWOL, that he had refused to take a flying exam, and that he had not shown up for National Guard duty. And it turned out that the documents were typed in a font that was not available on a typewriter in the 1960s when they were supposedly done, and were forgeries. They had the wrong abbreviations. They were set up wrong. They had signatures in the wrong place. And the author, the supposed author of these, supposedly typed them himself when his widow said he never typed. He didn't type. And
didn't Burkett, I'm trying to remember, but didn't Burkett have some kind of a grievance against President Bush?
He was both. He had both grievances about his treatment at the National Guard that occurred before Bush was president and before Bush was governor. And he also was a left-winger who had a bias against Bush and was trying to ingratiate himself with the Kerry campaign. But there was a tissue of lies from start to finish. The 30-page summary in the CBS report is devastating. In fact, CBS, which ran this as part of 60 Minutes, issued a statement about the movie. It's worth reading.
Well, wait, don't, because I'm going to read a statement. Because one of the things you got to understand, you may be wondering what this is all about, but this is going to be a big movie. Robert Redford, Cate Blanchett, comes out on Friday. At the time, Dan Rather, who first apologized on the air and later left CBS, then he sued CBS and said that the CBS's corporate interests had forced them to go against the movie and to go against him. He sued. The case was thrown out summarily by a judge. CBS now says this about its own report and its own reporters and the movie. The film tries to turn gross errors of journalism and judgment into acts of heroism and martyrdom. I guess I have to ask you one. How could Robert Redford and Cate Blanchett and the movie makers here think they're going to get away with this?
Well, I don't know that they think they're going to get away with it, Chris. I think they're glorifying, they're creating heroes, and they're doing it at a time when American trust in journalism is abysmally low. People just don't trust journalism right now, and part of it, I think, is a sense that a journalism is done for corporate reasons, for ratings, or to appeal to one bias or one slant or another. And they just don't trust journalists in the way that we used to, the way that people once trusted your dad. And so what you get is, though, a situation where Carl and I don't agree on much, but let's go to the facts. And the facts are that the documents proved to be fraudulent. The fact is that Dan Rather had to apologize.
And so his career was ended.
So you get, but people would argue, Carl, that that's the corporation protecting its corporate interest in Washington. They were fearful that Viacom had interest on the table and that George Bush and the Republicans would punish them. That's where I think it gets crazy.
Baloney.
Well, okay.
Let me also say, you brought up my dad. I will tell you that my father ended up confronting Dan Rather at one point about this because the executive producer of CBS 2 had been fired. So had Mary Mapes, and my father said to Rather, you know what, if your team gets fired, you should quit too.
Well, that's the judgment.
So
you left out the best quote from CBS. It's astounding how little truth there is in truth, says CBS. There are, in fact, too many distortions, evasions, and baseless conspiracy theories to enumerate them.
Should be renamed revisionism. Thank you, panel. See you next Sunday.